Nobody knew exactly when the disappearances began. At first, it was easy to ignore. A hunter failed to return from the northern forests. A survey drone vanished over an unexplored canyon. Then an entire scientific expedition stopped responding without sending a single distress signal. On the frontier world of Keeler 9, strange things happened all the time. But when 23 people vanished within 6 months, the colonial authority finally declared an emergency. The official explanation was simple. Dangerous wildlife, pirates, equipment failures, the usual excuses. The settlers didn't believe any of them, because no bodies were ever found. Not one. No blood. No wreckage. No graves. Nothing. People simply disappeared, as if the planet itself had swallowed them. Commander Ethan Ross stood inside the operations center, staring at a giant holographic map. Red markers blinked across the display. Each marker represented a missing person. The pattern was impossible to miss. Every disappearance happened near the same region. A vast wilderness known as the Silent Valley. What makes this place special? Ross asked. The colony's chief scientist, Dr. Maya Chen, zoomed the map closer. That's the problem, she said. Nothing. Ross raised an eyebrow. No mineral deposits. No military value. No alien ruins. She sighed. It should be the most boring place on the planet. Ross folded his arms. Yet people keep disappearing there. Exactly. The room fell silent. Finally Ross made his decision. Prepare a team. The scientist looked up. You want to investigate personally? I've seen enough reports. He turned toward the door. It's time someone went there and found out what's really happening. 3 days later, a heavily armed expedition entered Silent Valley. The team consisted of soldiers, scientists, drone operators, and survival experts. Every member carried tracking beacons and body cameras. This time, nobody intended to vanish. The valley looked harmless. Green grass stretched between rolling hills. Small rivers crossed the landscape. Bright blue trees swayed gently in the wind. Bird-like creatures floated through the sky. It seemed peaceful. Too peaceful. The first 2 days passed without incident. Nothing attacked them. Nothing followed them. Nothing appeared unusual. By the 3rd day, some team members began joking about the mission. Maybe the missing colonists had simply gotten lost. Maybe they had left the colony voluntarily. Maybe the entire mystery was a waste of time. Then the cameras found something. A drone flying above the valley detected a structure hidden beneath a cliff wall. Ross immediately ordered an investigation. The team approached carefully. At first glance, it looked like a cave entrance. But when they got closer, everyone stopped. The opening was perfectly circular. Its surface was smooth, artificial, not carved by water, not formed by nature. Something had built it. Something enormous. Dr. Chen examined the strange walls. I've never seen materials like this. Ross touched the surface. It felt warm, almost alive. Suddenly, one of the soldiers called out, "Commander!" Everyone rushed toward him. The soldier was pointing at the ground. There, pressed into the soft soil, was a footprint. Not human, not animal, and far larger than any known creature on Keeler 9. The footprint measured nearly 3 meters across. Silence spread through the group. Ross looked from the footprint to the dark tunnel beyond. A feeling of unease settled in his stomach. Whatever had made that track was massive, and it lived somewhere inside the mountain. Then the colony's communication officer received a signal. A weak signal. Very weak, but unmistakable. It came from inside the tunnel. The tracking beacon of a missing colonist. A colonist who had vanished almost 4 years earlier. And somehow, the beacon was still active. Ross stared into the darkness. Something was waiting down there. Something that had been taking people for years. And for the first time, they had found its home. No one spoke for several seconds. The weak tracking signal continued to pulse through the team's scanners. Beep, beep, beep. A steady rhythm from deep inside the mountain. Commander Ross checked the reading twice. There was no mistake. The beacon belonged to Samuel Vance, a geological surveyor who had disappeared 4 years ago. Officially, Vance had been declared dead. Now his signal was somehow active again. Could it be damaged equipment? One of the scientists asked. Dr. Chen shook her head. Not after 4 years. The power cell should have died long ago. Ross looked toward the tunnel. Only one way to find out. The expedition moved inside. Powerful lights cut through the darkness. The tunnel sloped downward at a gentle angle, leading deeper beneath the mountain. At first it looked natural. Then the details became impossible to ignore. The walls were perfectly smooth. The floor was level. The ceiling curved with impossible precision. It felt less like a cave and more like a corridor. Something had designed it. Something intelligent. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the environment became. Their scanners detected traces of unknown organic materials inside the walls. The structure wasn't made from stone. It was made from something biological. Something grown rather than built. Ross didn't like that idea. Not at all. After nearly an hour of walking, the tunnel opened into a chamber so enormous that the team's lights could not reveal its far end. Everyone stopped. No one could believe what they were seeing. Rows of structures stretched across the gigantic cavern. Small houses, research stations, shelters, vehicles, equipment, entire sections of missing colony infrastructure. Ross felt a chill run through him. This can't be real. But it was. Every object belonged to someone who had disappeared over the years. A transport rover missing for 8 months. A survey pod lost 3 years earlier. Scientific equipment from abandoned expeditions. Everything was here. Nothing appeared damaged. Nothing appeared destroyed. It looked as if someone had carefully collected each item and arranged it neatly inside the cavern. Like exhibits inside a museum. Then Dr. Chen noticed something even stranger. Commander. She pointed toward one side of the chamber. The team followed her gaze. There, under soft glowing lights, stood a small colony cabin. Ross recognized it immediately. Cabin 14. A remote weather station that had vanished with 2 researchers nearly 5 years ago. The cabin looked untouched. The windows were clean. The furniture remained inside. Even the dishes were still sitting on a table. As though the occupants had simply stepped outside for a moment. The feeling of unease spread through the group. This wasn't the lair of a predator. Predators left destruction. This place was organized. Preserved. Protected. Something was keeping these objects. Saving them. Collecting them. A sudden voice interrupted everyone's thoughts. Movement detected. Several soldiers immediately raised their weapons. A scanner operator pointed toward the darkness. Multiple life signs. Human life signs. Ross's heart skipped a beat. How many? The operator stared at the display. His eyes widened. At least 30. The entire team froze. 30 humans. Alive. Inside the mountain. Ross immediately followed the readings through the massive chamber. The signals led toward another passage. A much larger passage. One that descended even deeper underground. The group moved carefully. The life signs grew stronger. Closer. Then they reached another cavern. And what they found there left every member of the expedition speechless. Hundreds of lights illuminated a gigantic underground valley. Artificial rivers flowed through green fields. Trees grew beneath glowing ceilings. Small homes stood scattered across the landscape. People walked between them. Human beings. Dozens of them. Some were settlers who had disappeared years ago. Others had vanished decades earlier. They were alive. Healthy. Smiling. Living normal lives. One elderly man looked directly at Ross. The commander's eyes widened in shock. The man's face matched a photograph from colonial archives. He had disappeared 27 years ago. And somehow, he had not aged at all. Then a deep vibration echoed through the cavern. The ground trembled beneath everyone's feet. The settlers stopped walking. Every face turned toward the darkness beyond the valley. And for the first time, fear appeared in their eyes. Something was coming. The collector had returned. The vibration grew stronger. Dust drifted from the cavern ceiling. The ground trembled with slow, powerful impacts. Thump, thump, thump. Every step echoed across the underground valley. Commander Ross noticed something strange. The settlers were not running. They were not screaming. They were simply watching. Nervously, respectfully, as if they were waiting for the arrival of someone important. Or something important. The expedition soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. Targeting systems activated. Safety locks disengaged. Ross raised a hand. Hold your fire. Nobody argued. Whatever was approaching had apparently kept dozens of missing humans alive for years. That alone made the situation far more complicated than a simple threat assessment. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the valley. Then a massive shape emerged from the darkness. Several soldiers gasped. Others simply stared. The creature was enormous. At least 20 meters tall. Its body resembled no known species. Long limbs supported a broad frame covered in silver-gray plates that looked almost like living armor. Its skin reflected the cavern lights with a faint metallic glow. 6 eyes lined the front of its head. Each eye moved independently, studying everything, watching everyone. Yet the most unsettling thing was not its size, not its appearance. It was the expression in its eyes. Curiosity. The creature looked at the humans the way a scientist might examine a rare discovery. Not with hunger. Not with hatred. With fascination. The giant slowly approached the valley. Several settlers lowered their heads. Others waved. To Ross's amazement, the creature responded by gently raising one enormous hand. Like a greeting, Dr. Chen whispered, "It's intelligent." The statement hardly seemed necessary. Everything about the being suggested intelligence. The creature suddenly stopped. Its eyes focused on the armed expedition team. The atmosphere changed instantly. The settlers became tense. The soldiers became tense. Even the creature appeared cautious. For several long moments, nobody moved. Then something completely unexpected happened. The giant reached behind its body and carefully placed an object on the ground. A transport crate. Ross recognized the colony markings immediately. The crate had disappeared 6 months earlier. The creature nudged it toward the humans. Almost like a gift. "What is it doing?" one soldier asked. Nobody answered. The giant then repeated the action. Another missing object. A scientific drone. Then another. A communication relay. Each item was placed gently before the expedition team. The creature seemed proud. Like a child showing a collection. Ross slowly lowered his weapon. The giant noticed. Several of its eyes blinked. Then, for the first time, it made a sound. A deep series of low tones echoed through the cavern. The noise wasn't aggressive. It sounded almost conversational. Dr. Chen quickly activated a recording device. Maybe it's trying to communicate. The creature produced another sequence of sounds. Different this time. More complex. The scientists began collecting data immediately. Then an elderly settler stepped forward. The same man Ross had recognized earlier. "I know what it's saying." Everyone turned toward him. Ross stared in disbelief. "You understand it?" The old man nodded. "Not perfectly. But after 27 years, I've learned a little." The commander stepped closer. "Then tell us." The settler looked toward the giant. The creature watched him quietly. Then the old man spoke. "It says it is pleased." Ross frowned. "Pleased about what?" The old man's face grew pale. "Because more humans have finally arrived." Silence spread across the valley. The answer felt wrong. Very wrong. Ross glanced toward the dozens of settlers living underground. A disturbing possibility began forming in his mind. The creature wasn't rescuing humans. It wasn't protecting them. It wasn't studying them. It was collecting them. Just like someone might collect rare artifacts. The old man continued speaking. His voice trembled slightly. "It believes humanity is precious." Ross felt a chill. "And that's bad." The settler slowly nodded. His eyes never left the giant. Because collectors never stop after finding one thing they love. The creature suddenly emitted another series of low sounds. The old man's face turned white. What did it say? Ross demanded. The settler swallowed hard. Then he whispered the words nobody wanted to hear. It says its collection is still incomplete. And somewhere far beyond the mountain, across the planet's surface, over 2 million colonists lived on Keeler 9. The creature intended to collect every single one. The cavern fell silent after the translation. Even the soldiers seemed unsure what to do. Normally, a threat was easy to identify. A hostile army. A dangerous predator. A weapon. But this creature was different. It wasn't trying to kill anyone. It wasn't even threatening violence. Yet the idea of 2 million colonists being gathered into an underground collection was terrifying. Commander Ross stepped forward. What exactly does it mean by incomplete? The elderly settler listened as the giant creature produced another sequence of deep sounds. After a moment, he translated. It says humans are scattered. The creature spoke again. It says humans belong together. Another pause. It says it is helping. Ross exchanged a glance with Dr. Chen. The giant honestly believed it was doing something good. That made the situation far more dangerous. People who knew they were monsters could sometimes be reasoned with. People who believed they were heroes rarely stopped. The creature slowly walked toward the valley. None of the settlers ran. They simply watched. The giant knelt beside a group of children and carefully placed several polished stones before them. The children smiled. The creature seemed pleased. Ross felt deeply unsettled. Everything about the being resembled a caretaker. Yet every person here had been taken against their will. Dr. Chen approached one of the settlers. Why didn't you leave? The woman looked confused. Leave? You could have escaped. The settler glanced toward the giant. Most people tried. Ross listened carefully. The woman continued. It always brought them back. Not with force. Not with weapons. Not with cages. The creature simply followed them. No matter where they went. No matter how far they traveled. Eventually it found them. Then it carried them home. Home. The word sounded wrong. Very wrong. Another settler joined the conversation. The creature calls this place the sanctuary. Ross frowned. Sanctuary from what? The answer came immediately. Everything. The giant believed the outside universe was dangerous. Wars. Diseases. Natural disasters. Accidents. Predators. It had studied humanity for centuries. And it had reached a conclusion. Humans were fragile. Humans needed protection. So it protected them. By taking them. The realization sent chills through Ross. This wasn't a hunter. This wasn't a monster. It was an obsessed guardian. A collector convinced it was saving priceless treasures. Dr. Chen suddenly looked alarmed. Commander. She pointed toward her scanner. Ross walked over. His stomach tightened. New signals were appearing. Thousands of them. Energy spikes across the entire planet. What are those? The scientist quickly analyzed the data. Then her face went pale. Oh no. What? The answer came seconds later. Orbital satellites began transmitting emergency alerts. Colony communication networks exploded with warnings. Across Keeler 9, gigantic structures were emerging from underground. Mountains were opening. Forests were splitting apart. Ancient tunnels were awakening. The creature had not built one sanctuary. It had built hundreds. Hidden all over the planet. Ross stared at the incoming reports. Each structure was connected. Each was active. Each was preparing for something. The giant suddenly produced another deep series of sounds. The elderly settler listened. His expression became horrified. What did it say? Ross demanded. The old man looked at him. The collection phase is complete. Ross felt ice in his veins. And now? The settler struggled to answer. Finally he whispered. It says relocation begins today. As if responding to those words, the ground shook violently. Across the cavern, massive doors began opening. Huge transport platforms rose from beneath the valley floor. Machines that had slept for centuries came alive. Dr. Chen stared at the readings. The numbers were impossible. The giant had enough transport capacity to move millions of people. Not over years. Not over months. Within days. Ross looked up at the towering creature. For the first time, he understood the scale of the problem. Humanity was not facing an invasion. Humanity was facing adoption. And the creature was absolutely determined to take every human on the planet into its care. Emergency messages flooded every communication channel on Keeler 9. Entire cities reported strange activity. Ancient machines were emerging from underground across the planet. Transport towers rose from deserts. Massive tunnels opened beneath forests. Gigantic carriers surfaced from beneath oceans. Panic spread quickly. Nobody understood what was happening. Commander Ross understood. And that frightened him more than anything. The creature was not preparing for war. It was preparing for relocation. Millions of people would soon be gathered into sanctuaries whether they agreed or not. Ross stood before the giant being. For a moment, he simply studied it. The creature had spent centuries protecting humans. Feeding them. Housing them. Caring for them. In its own way, it genuinely loved humanity. Yet everything about its plan was wrong. Because it had never understood the one thing that made humans human. Freedom. Dr. Chen worked frantically with her equipment. She had been recording the creature's sounds for hours. Slowly, patterns emerged. Grammar. Meaning. Language. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. "We can talk to it," she announced. Ross immediately turned toward her. "Can we make it understand us?" The scientist hesitated. "I don't know." "Then let's find out." Using speakers and translation software, Ross transmitted a message. The giant became still. Every one of its 6 eyes focused on him. Ross took a breath. "You say you want to protect humanity." The translation echoed through the cavern. The creature listened carefully. Then it responded. The machine translated. "Yes." Ross continued. "You believe humans are valuable. Very valuable. You believe gathering us together will keep us safe." "Yes." The giant sounded almost hopeful, as if it expected praise. Ross looked directly into its enormous eyes. Then he said the words that mattered most. "If you truly value humans, then why do you ignore what humans want?" The translation echoed across the valley. Silence followed. The creature did not answer immediately. For the first time since they had met it, the giant seemed confused. Ross pressed forward. "You protect us from danger." "Yes." "You provide food and shelter." "Yes." "You stop us from suffering." "Yes." Ross nodded. "Then why do so many of your collection try to escape?" The question struck like a weapon. The creature froze. Around them, dozens of settlers watched quietly. Some had lived here for decades. Others for only a few years. Almost all of them had tried to leave at least once. The giant produced a series of uncertain sounds. The translation system struggled. Finally, a sentence appeared. "They do not understand what is best for them." Ross expected that answer. And he was ready. Parents say that. The creature tilted its head. Rulers say that. It continued listening. Dictators say that. The valley became completely silent. Ross pointed toward the settlers. "Humans are not treasures." The giant remained motionless. "We are not artifacts." No response. "We are not objects to be protected inside a display." Several settlers lowered their heads. Many had waited years to hear someone say those words. Ross stepped forward. His voice grew stronger. "The thing that makes humanity valuable is our freedom to choose." The translation echoed across the enormous cavern. "If we choose wrong, we learn. If we fail, we grow. If we take risks, we become stronger." The creature's eyes shifted across the valley, studying the humans around it. For the first time, Uncertainty appeared in its expression. Ross saw it happen. A crack in centuries of certainty. Then Dr. Chen suddenly received a transmission from orbit. Her face changed instantly. "Commander." Ross looked at her. The scientist swallowed hard. "The planetary scans are complete." "What did they find?" She stared at the report. Then she whispered, "There isn't just one collector." Ross felt his blood run cold. Far above the planet, satellites had discovered something impossible. Hundreds of enormous life signs were moving beneath the surface of Keeler 9. Hundreds. The giant before them was only one member of a species. And every single one of them was waking up. The news hit the valley like a shockwave. Hundreds of collectors. Hundreds of giant beings hidden beneath Keeler 9. All awakening at the same time. Commander Ross stared at the orbital report. If every collector followed the same philosophy, humanity was facing the largest forced relocation in its history. Not through violence. Not through conquest. But through protection. And that somehow made it even harder to stop. The giant collector remained silent. Ross's words had clearly affected it. Its 6 eyes slowly moved across the settlers gathered in the valley. Many looked nervous. Some looked hopeful. Others simply waited. For years, they had lived under the care of a creature that never understood why they wanted freedom. Now, for the first time, it was questioning itself. Dr. Chen suddenly noticed something. The other collectors are communicating. Signals were moving through the planet-wide network. Huge amounts of data. Messages. Discussions. Questions. The giant before them was sharing everything. The conversations. The translations. Ross's arguments. Humanity's desire for freedom. The collectors were listening. All of them. The giant finally spoke. The translation system activated. "We believed we were helping." Ross nodded. "I know. We saved many humans." "You did." The giant's eyes focused on the settlers. "We loved them." Ross could hear genuine sadness in its voice. That was never the problem. A long silence followed. Then the creature asked a question. A simple question. One it had apparently never considered before. "If we do not protect you, what is our purpose?" The settlers exchanged glances. Even Ross hesitated. Then an elderly woman stepped forward. She had disappeared nearly 20 years earlier. The collector immediately recognized her. It carefully lowered its head to listen. The woman smiled. "You don't have to stop caring." The translation echoed through the valley. "You just have to stop choosing for us." The giant remained motionless. The woman continued. "Protect us when we ask. Help us when we need help. Stand beside us." She gently touched one of the creature's enormous fingers. "But don't keep us." The giant looked at her for a long time. Then something remarkable happened. Across the planet, every collector stopped moving. Orbital satellites confirmed it. Transport systems powered down. Relocation platforms shut off. Ancient machines returned to standby mode. The entire species had reached a decision. The giant spoke one final time. Its voice echoed through every connected sanctuary on Keeler 9. "The collection is ended." Cheers erupted throughout the valley. People laughed. Some cried. Others embraced family members they thought they would never see again. For the first time in centuries, every human held by the collectors was free to choose where they wanted to live. Months later, many settlers returned to the surface. Some stayed underground. But now it was their decision. Not the collectors. As for the giant beings themselves, they discovered a new purpose. They became allies. Guardians by invitation. Rescuers during disasters. Builders. Teachers. Explorers. Partners. They learned something humanity had known for thousands of years. Love without freedom becomes a prison. Love with freedom becomes a gift. And in the years that followed, the former collectors earned a new name among the stars. Not collectors. Not monsters. Friends. The species that once tried to gather humanity into a collection eventually became one of humanity's closest allies. And whenever young humans asked why the giants were so careful to respect personal choice, the answer was always the same. Because long ago, on a distant world called Keeler 9, an entire species learned that the rarest thing in the universe was not human life. It was human freedom. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more HFY adventures among the stars.